Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lisa, and I work in the alumni relations team at UCL. It's great to see so many of you here. We've had over 1,000 people register to attend this event, so it's clearly a topic that's of interest for so many people. I'm really looking forward to hearing from our guest speaker today, as I'm sure you are too. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are new to the UCL Connect series, this event is part of a series that looks at improving the professional and personal development skills and expertise of alumni and students across the global UCL community. So whatever stage of life you're in, the UCL Connect series has something for everybody. On the screen, you'll see a few examples of some previous sessions we've run. If you'd like to rewatch any of them, you can see the URL at the bottom. Please visit the website there. The program is a mix of virtual and in-person events, and they run around once a month during term time. So before we begin, I wanted to let everyone know that this event is being recorded. There'll be an opportunity to ask some questions at the end, and you can do this by writing your questions in the Q&A section, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Please put your questions in there and then upvote any that you'd like to see answered as well, as we've got a lot of people on the call today. We won't have time to answer everyone's questions, so it's really important to use the upvote function, and that will decide which questions we answer first. So if you want to bring up live captions on your screen, you'll need to turn these on individually. So to use this feature, you'll see a button that has 3 dots and the word more at the bottom of your screen. If you click that button, followed by the word captions, and then the option that says show captions, that feature will be enabled for you. So what can you expect from today's session? Well, our speaker will begin with her presentation, followed by questions from you. So I'm delighted to hand over to Sunita Harley, who is a UCL alum and founder of Collective Insight, which is a leadership and team development, inclusion and coaching consultancy. Thanks so much for joining us today, Sunita. Over to you.
Great. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining. Do let me know in the chat box if you also graduated between the years of 1995 and 1998. I know that's a long time ago. That was when I was at UCL. So I am just going to share my slides. Great. And I really do encourage you to share your questions today. We're going to be covering quite a lot because how to get noticed at work covers so many different topics. So I really encourage you to share your questions. And I'm sorry that we won't be able to necessarily answer everyone's, but I think it's really helpful to kind of also share your own thoughts in this session. We're going to be using the chat box, and at the very end, just to give you a heads up for everyone who's dialing in live, there will be an opportunity to share your personal actions in a Slido format where all of your actions will be anonymous, but it means that I can send that list back to Lisa and Emily in the alumni team, and they can also share that out with the participants today. So thank you for joining also if you're watching this on playback, and I also hope that you see everyone's contributions in the chat box and you find these helpful. So what are we going to cover off today? We're going to talk about how to actually advocate for yourself through your personal brand. And I'm going to talk about what personal brand is, what it means, what it refers to. I'm also going to talk about emotional intelligence. And don't worry if you haven't heard about that term or you don't use that term very much. I'll be talking about how we can actually leverage emotional intelligence, our own emotional intelligence, to actually strengthen our professional brand and to strengthen our visibility at work, regardless of what point we're at in our career, regardless of what role we might be doing or what kind of career we might be pursuing. And then I'll also touch on how to actually build your career network. And whether you're currently studying at the moment, or you're a graduate, or you're part of the alumni community at UCL, or maybe you work at UCL or you collaborate with UCL, we can start building our career networks at any point. So when advocating for yourself through your personal brand, I wanted to just share some personal stories about how I've done that. And basically, when we talk about personal brand, I always think it's about what am I known for? Now, growing up, I would have been known for being a very shy person, very creative. So we sometimes carry through things from when we were younger or from different phases of our life in terms of our personal brand. But our personal brands grow and develop. They absolutely do not change. They do not stay the same. For some of us, they do not change. But for what I found personally is that my personal brand has definitely grown and evolved over the years. Now, in my early career, and if you read my bio, you would have seen that I worked in the fields of music and fashion and media. So immediately after leaving UCL, I went into the media industry. And that was also because at UCL, I did get involved in lots of different activities, lots of different networks, committees, which meant that it really gave me an opportunity to really focus on my creative side, my creative skills. And then I was also studying human geography and anthropology. So I did also actually get involved through the UCL Union, through DJing at the time. So I was DJing a number of different Thursday nights at UCL Union, which was fantastic. And that actually started to build my personal brand. And one of the things that I was known for was the fact that I loved music. I really enjoyed DJing. I enjoyed contributing to some of like the different annual events as well. And so it was something that I was known for. When I left university, I also worked in fashion. And so I worked with one of the biggest agencies, IMG, and I was booked to appear in lots of different, whether it was advertising campaigns, music videos, London Fashion Week. And again, that started to build up my personal brand. What was Sunita known for? But this wasn't just about my visual brand. And obviously, when you're working in fashion as a model, you are very much about your visual brand. But it was also about my personal brand. So when companies or brands would book me to appear in their photo shoots or their campaigns, they were also sometimes thinking about what is Sunita like to work with. And I think my personal brand back then was very much about being approachable. I was collaborative. I was happy to kind of follow the guidance. I was open to different ideas. But part of my personal brand back then, when immediately after leaving university and working in media, was very much about actually just building connections with people. I enjoyed the fact that I got to work with lots of different teams. I had to adapt to what the spec was for the job. But I also had to build my confidence very quickly. And the picture that I showed you at the start of me, probably around 6, 7 years old at primary school, I'll be honest, I was not a confident kid. I was shy. I would definitely not put myself forward for opportunities at school. But what I realized is that I definitely built up my confidence, especially when I was at UCL, because of the different opportunities that I either tried to sort out myself or maybe opportunities that people recommended me for. So I didn't always work in media, music, and fashion. What I actually decided to do was then study for my master's in human resources management. I really liked the topic because it actually linked back to my anthropology degree. And effectively, I was working with different organizational cultures. And that was like the anthropology side and also the human geography side. So I then moved into the corporate space. And my personal brand, what I realized is that some of my personal brand needed to stay the same. So the importance of building connections, the confidence piece, being proactive, but also I needed to adapt my personal brand to move into the corporate space. Back then, early 2000s, when I moved into the corporate space, it was very different to now. You did have to dress a certain way. I definitely would have not turned up to work in a bright red blazer that I'm wearing now. And that was also depending on the organizational culture that I was going into at the firm. So my personal brand was definitely back then, it was hardworking, it was about being proactive, it was about building connections. But I also had to think about how am I going to also represent the brand of the organization I'm working for. So that kind of encouraged me to think about, actually, what do I want my personal brand to be now that I am in a different part of my career? And then fast forward about 15 years. So after working in a number of law firms, including Herbert Smith Freehills, Adelshaw Goddard, I also worked at Aviva Investors, which was my very first corporate role. And then I decided to set up Collective Insight, which was my own consultancy, focusing on doing anything to do with inclusion, delivering coaching programs, whether that's for individuals or for groups or teams, delivering leadership development programs. And then I also wanted to make sure that I would also build on the expertise in terms of my learning and development skills. So I decided to build my own brand as Collective Insight. So again, it comes back to, what am I known for? And again, some of those themes are very similar. So being collaborative, I love building connections. I love being quite creative in my work, coming up with ideas for my clients. And it's been great because actually this month I'm celebrating 9 years of running Collective Insight, which was launched back in 2016. And when people work with me, they always give me feedback, which is, again, is really, really important. And I do need to continue to keep building my network, but I also need to invest in my network. So what can our personal brands also lead to? Now, back in 2023, so this is a photo from the Women and Diversity in Law Awards. And because I was doing a lot of work in the legal sector with different client firms, law firms, I also did work with organisations like Marie Curie, Lloyds Banking Group. I was actually awarded Diversity Champion of the Year, which was amazing. And part of me feels that that was also my personal brand contributing to that, not just because of what I'm known for, but also what do I do? And I'll be talking about that in a moment. It's really important to think about what you do and how you bring value. And that also brings your ideas, and it helps you to build that personal brand. In the photo, for those of you who might recognize who these individuals are, you may not, no worries, but the lady with the big diamante necklace, that is the TV presenter from the 70s, 80s and 90s, Flora Benjamin, Baroness Benjamin. So she handed my award. And then also Dr. Sarah Chandler, who's a lecturer at South Bank University. So I just want you to pop over to the chat box. I've given you some ideas about what my personal brand is, but I would love you to just share one word which describes your personal brand. And I'll give you a moment to do that. So just share one word that describes your personal brand. So people have said enthusiastic, hardworking, empowering, authentic, reliability, effective, neurodiverse, caring, proactive, reliable, committed, prepared, can do, which I think again really overlaps with proactive, empathetic and mission driven, human and self-aware. And that's fantastic that somebody's mentioned self-aware, because I'll be talking about that shortly. Approachable and loyal, funny, definitely. And that's why in a lot of my presentations, I do sometimes, when I'm introducing myself, I do include that photo of myself when I was back at primary school, just to try and kind of break the ice, or just show people that I'm also kind of able to show different sides of myself when I connect with people. And again, resilience and perseverance, catalyst and positive. Brilliant. Thank you. So you're welcome to keep adding your words if you need to. So I just want to share a few ideas in terms of what your personal brand can refer to. And many of you have actually referred to some of this in the chat box, but it also talks about your experience, and that can be experience from any parts of your life or your career stages or your studies. It doesn't have to be necessarily about what you're doing right now. So you might refer to some of your past experience, or people might know you for your past career experiences or your academic studies or the achievements or anything that you got involved in when you were studying. Personal brand also refers to skills and also your knowledge. And your knowledge, you don't have to be professors. It might just be any kind of level of expertise that you have. So these are very tangible things, actually, in terms of your experience, skills, and knowledge. These are things that people should be able to see, they should be able to hear about. And it's also important that you learn to self-advocate in the workplace in terms of making sure that you are being noticed by the right people in your circle, in your career, or in your team or your role. And that's also linked to building visibility in your career and in the workplace. Now, your personal brand also refers to your contribution, how you collaborate, and also how you communicate. And this is what I call the 3 C's. These are 3 C's that I've pulled together in terms of what your personal brand can represent. Now, let's just think about contribution first. Contribution is basically, what do you deliver in your role? Where do you add value? What are the tasks or the responsibilities that you are known for looking after? Contribution might also overlap into proactivity. So where can you be proactive? Where can you offer some help? Where can you offer a new idea or a different perspective? Collaboration is how we work with people. And this is really important, whether you're working remotely, you work in a hybrid workspace, or you work in person, an office or a venue or a location. It's really important to constantly think about how we're collaborating with each other. And also communication. This is really important to your personal brand. Now, communication styles will vary. People will have preferred ways of communicating with their colleagues or with their clients or their customer base. They might also have preferred ways for how they receive communications. So do think about that in terms of your own communication style. Now, we mentioned emotional intelligence, and this is really important because emotional intelligence it's basically a concept from the 90s. And it is talked about in the workplace, and it does refer to a number of different things in terms of basically how we manage our emotions. So I just want you to head over to the chat box, and I just want you to have a go at sharing what you think emotional intelligence refers to. And you can share one word, or you can share your own definition. So I'll give you a moment to do that. So yes, EQ, it's also known as EQ or EI, sensibility, empathy, awareness of others' emotions, emotional regulation, so how we manage our own emotions, the way that you make people feel, absolutely. And understanding the emotional state of a person in front of you or when you're communicating to somebody, because absolutely, because that can change even in a conversation. And not letting your emotions obstruct your work or distract you. Reading the room, absolutely. That's something I do. So when I deliver training sessions, whether it's for a group of leaders or it's for a team, I'm always reading the room, trying to pick up on people's visual cues. And also somebody's mentioned being able to feel the room as well. So can we see how people are reacting? How are they responding to what we're saying? And also somebody has mentioned that, for people who have a high level of empathy, you can always, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're necessarily demonstrating that kindness, definitely. So again, you do need to think about how other people are feeling, whether you're working on a project, whether you're in a moment of stress in terms of deadlines, or maybe there are some challenges. It's about how you respond through your own emotions, how you manage your own emotions, but also how you pay attention to other people's emotions. So thank you so much, everyone. So why is emotional intelligence so important to our own personal brand? As some of you have mentioned, this is about using our self-awareness. I always say, so when I'm often coaching different professionals across different sectors at different points in their careers, I always say self-awareness is a skill. It's a quality that we can actually bring to the workplace or to the team that we're working within. Self-awareness is incredibly important for making sure that we understand how we perform in our roles, how we engage with people, how we can also learn from different pieces of feedback. And I always say, you know, I'm constantly learning. My clients who I work with, the teams or the individuals, they often give me feedback on the work that I deliver for them. And it's about using my self-awareness to really kind of reflect on that feedback and think about, what are my learning opportunities here? And on a recent LinkedIn post, I was talking actually about Diwali, which I celebrate with my family. And I was talking about how Diwali for me is actually an opportunity to kind of really turn up that self-awareness, to really reflect on how things have gone personally, professionally over the last 12 months, but also reflect on actually, are there any learning lessons? What can I do better? Emotional intelligence is also really important to our personal brand because, again, as some of you mentioned, it's about that empathy. It's about how do we connect with each other? How do we connect with others who we're meeting for the first time? How do we reconnect with people who we haven't seen for a while, or maybe we haven't had the chance to work with them? So I'll be talking a little bit later on about actually how to build your network. Again, emotional intelligence and what we're known for in terms of our personal brand and how we get noticed at work also links to how we respond to different work situations. That could be when things are going really well in the workspace or in the academic space. How do we choose to respond? Are we giving people recognition? Are we thanking people for their contributions? Are we acknowledging when people have supported us? But then also the more challenging work situations, if there's high levels of stress or people are feeling different pressures, again, how do we choose to respond to those situations? And that's where also I always encourage you that regardless of where you work or your academic team that you work within, if you're doing your studies or you've just graduated, that it's really important to think about who is your support network. I know for myself, I have experienced a number of different challenges in my career and a lot of different life setbacks as well. And I have always made sure that I've got my support network in place. And that could literally be a really small group of people who I trust, or a small group of people who I know I can go to for guidance, or who I know that they will be a listening ear for me, or they'll be a trusted sounding board. So it's really important to make sure that you do have that support network in place. So how can we advocate for ourselves in terms of letting people know what our personal brand is, but also how can we build that visibility at work? And this is really important. And I was talking about this at a conference at the end of September. There were about 120 people in the room. Most of them were lawyers. And I was talking about the importance of basically being proactive. And you do need to be quite proactive. You can't assume that everybody will just know about your personal brand. Everyone's going to pay attention to what you do, how you bring value. You do also need to try and communicate that. Now, for some of us, that's easier. For some of us who are happy to speak or contribute at a team meeting, for example, or put our hand up in a really busy lecture theatre room and ask a question in front of everyone. But for some of us, and this isn't just linked to neurodiversities or neuroqualities, as I like to call them, This is also linked to our personal preferences. For some of us, actually, we are more private, we are more reflective for maybe some cultural context of whether it's our upbringing or the jurisdictions or regions that we work in, or even the organizational culture. We have to follow what the norms might be, you know, in terms of speaking up and promoting yourself. So also find the right balance for you and the right balance for the context that you're working in. Now, I'll start with the 3 C's. So firstly, we'll talk about contribution. One thing that I recommend, and I often coach a lot of people who are in leadership roles in different organizations, and I often ask them, you know, when was the last time you jotted down some of your biggest achievements in your career? I also ask people to jot down, regardless of what level they're at in their career, regardless of what role they're doing, to jot down some of the smallest achievements in their career or in their role, or even over the last 6 weeks. What are some of the examples where you know that you're adding value, even if other people aren't recognizing that or vocalizing that? In terms of your contribution, it's also really important to understand expectations. So think about this in terms of actually what's expected of me in my role. Who is expecting this? When are they expecting it? What does success look like for them? It's really important that we're proactive in terms of really understanding what other people need from us. And again, in terms of our contribution, I'm always conscious, and I'm always self-conscious as well, that there's always an opportunity to change how things are done, reflect on how you can do things differently, or if you feel appropriate, better. So in terms of collaboration, I really encourage people to think about spotting those collaborative opportunities to help out other people across the team, opportunities to work together with people inside your team, outside of your team, or maybe externally. So some of you might have industry networks that you're a part of. Spot those collaboration opportunities so that you're also being visible across your industry or across your organization, your company, or your firm. Collaboration is also about being proactive. So don't always wait for opportunities to come your way. I know, due to my own personal background, whether it's due to being an ethnically diverse woman, or sometimes being the only woman on senior leadership or exec teams at big businesses and firms, I've had to be proactive. I've had to remind people of where I can add value. I've had to volunteer for big projects. I've had to seek guidance on how I can be recommended for different work opportunities. But it's also trying to sell that in terms of actually how can you support other people as well? How can you bring them in? So do share more about the value that you can bring, and also find your supporters in the organization who will champion you. So in terms of communication, this is also really important, because we talked a lot just now about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is, for me, it's all about communication. It's about what my preferred communication style is, when I perform really well, what am I doing in terms of communication, but also in those situations where actually I need to adapt my communication style. So actually, do I need to listen more? Do I need to contribute more? Do I need to communicate more in a written way, or actually do I need to verbalize something, or do I need to rehearse how I'm going to verbalize something? So I work with a lot of people on developing their public speaking or their presentation skills, and it might be that you have to think about, how can I rehearse something? So again, that's going to give me more visibility, or when I do need to be quite visible in a meeting and actively contribute, I'm going to feel confident about it. I'm going to feel prepared. Now, in terms of your communication approach as well, and again, a lot of this overlaps with emotional intelligence, it's also about how do people value what you say and how you say it? What do they value and appreciate about your approach? And this is where it's really important that you focus on feedback, or ask people for feedback about how you contribute. Is there anything that you can do differently, but also ask people, you know, what do you appreciate about the way that I work with you or work in the team? So how to build your career network. Thank you for everyone's comments in the chat box. I would love you to share one word now that describes networking. So just one word, how would you describe networking? Might be how you feel about networking. Yes, thank you. Somebody has said terrifying, opportunity, nerve-wracking, awkward, daunting, exhausting, stressful. Also networking, it can sometimes, if you're neurotypical or if you're neurodiverse, again, you might feel differently about networking. Absolutely. Fun and terrifying, definitely. So I think I describe it as basically building connections, which actually makes me feel better about the term networking. Sometimes I think the word networking can feel really, really informal. What you're actually doing, for those of you who are dialing in right now, you're actually networking in the chat box. You're sharing how you feel about something. You're sharing ideas about something. You're sharing your thoughts. So remember that building connections can show up in lots of different ways, and we can build connections in different formats and in different activities. Now, I think there are quite a few myths about networking, so I wanted to share some of these with you. But the first one is that networking is only for those who might identify or describe themselves as extroverts. So when we talk about extroverts, some of the more well-known qualities or attributes of extroverts is that they like being center of attention, or they love engaging with people, they like being around big groups. But actually, networking isn't just for people who like networking. Networking is also for anybody who can connect with people or even have a one-to-one conversation. So networking also has to be mutually beneficial. Actually, it doesn't. So I know there are lots of definitions out there on Google where it says, you know, it has to be about an exchange of ideas or an exchange of services. Actually, networking does not have to be mutually beneficial. Over the last 9 years, one of the things that I've done on purpose is when I have met people, I've actually asked about them first. I haven't gone straight in talking about what I do or what Collective Insight does or what services I can provide them or their team or their organization. I actually just listen to them and ask more about them. Networking is all about talking. This is, again, another myth for me. I think one of the most powerful networking kind of conversations I've had is actually when either I've, again, been really listening to someone else, and then I've picked up on what's really important to them or what they really are passionate about or what they're really proud of. And also I found networking really helpful when other people have built connections with me by actually asking about myself or noticing that actually I'm one of the quieter ones in the group, in the conversation, and saying, oh, Sunita, what do you think? Or Sunita, it would be great to hear about, you know, what you've been working on recently or something that interests you. So listening is actually one of the key networking skills. There's also this myth or this perception that senior people or people who are more advanced in their careers have amazing networking skills. Again, that's not necessarily the case. In any workplace, it's likely that you will have more than 1 to 2 different generations. Some workplaces will have 4 different kind of generations in place. And again, I don't want to generalize about people from different generations, but it's really important to remember that as individuals, we all have our own experiences, which actually build networking skills. So, for example, I know somebody has said that it's actually really hard to get started in terms of your network. And that's where I would say, you know, start small and think about those different scenarios where you actually have been networking, but maybe you haven't realized. And remember, again, networking is also just about building connections, getting to know other people, letting other people get to know you. And that might actually be on a one-to-one basis. A quick reminder about career networks. sometimes when people talk about networking, they also think about, oh, it's about networking or building up a really big kind of database of people on LinkedIn or lots of connections. And actually, this is really important in terms of your external network. But actually, your internal network is about the people who you are around in the day-to-day, whether that's remotely or on a hybrid basis or in an in-person office basis. Your internal network can be your team. It might be people around your organization or around your academic institution, your university. Your internal network is incredibly powerful. And so don't always think that it's about networking with people who are outside of your team or outside of your organization. I wanted to quickly talk about imposterism. So I call this imposterism. And when I run sessions and workshops on navigating imposter syndrome or building your professional confidence, it's really important just to quickly reflect on how imposterism, as I like to call it, is something that can actually hold you back from networking, or it can make you feel a little bit uneasy about networking. And imposterism is basically a habit or a thinking pattern where actually we doubt our brilliance, we doubt our contributions, the value we bring, the skills, the achievements, or the expertise. And despite all of the actual evidence that exists about these qualities that we all bring, we worry that we might not be viewed as being good enough, or we might be compared to others who are perceived as being more successful or more experts or more confident or capable in their roles. And it's also when we explain our successes through external factors like, I was just lucky that I got that first job there, or that piece of work, or I was just in the right place, the right time. I always say to people that everything is down to what you bring, whether it's your skills, your abilities, your achievements, or who you are, what you're known for. A lot of this isn't necessarily down to luck, or a lot of it is down to you as an individual. So you must congratulate yourself for that. So just going to go through a few things that we've covered off today before we move into questions, but think about how you can advocate for yourself through your personal brand. Think about an opportunity. You don't have to advocate for yourself in front of large groups of people. It might just be in a one-to-one conversation. Think about that emotional intelligence, read more about how emotional intelligence shows up. Ask people about what they appreciate from you in terms of how you communicate with people, how you engage, or how you collaborate. And then also definitely think about steps that you can take to build your network. And even though I have been in the career space now for 20 years, I am still keen that I still build my network, that I still invest time in my network. And recently I've been doing that actually through a number of smaller conversations, whether it's just catching up with people on a one-to-one basis or in smaller groups, as well as the bigger events or the bigger conferences that I might speak at. But remember, you can start really small in terms of building your network. So a quick recap about the personal brand 3Cs, the 3Cs that I like to remind people about through my work at Collective Insights. So that's thinking about your contribution, how you bring value to your role or your responsibilities, your character as well in terms of collaboration and also communication. So this is a chance now for you to just do a bit of self-reflection, but just to share your action. This will come up anonymously on the Slido. And I just encourage you to share one action that you'll take, either to develop your own personal brand or to build your own career network. And I'll give you a moment to do that. And you'll be able to see the responses as well on the Slido as people add their thoughts. So I'll leave you to just share your thoughts there for a moment. And for those of you who are dialing in, unfortunately, you won't be able to access this Slido, but I will be reading out some of the examples. And again, this is also an opportunity for you to just reflect on one action that you can take to develop your personal brand or build your career network. So great, thank you. So just some of the answers that I'll just read out. So just noting down some of my small achievements in the last few weeks. Fantastic. Try to network more and actually just be a bit more courageous with networking, not expecting a two-way gain, definitely. And also make more time for one-to-one conversations. That's really important. And remember, one-to-one conversations work really well, whether you're working virtually or whether you're able to work in person or alongside your colleagues. And then be more confident to start a conversation, definitely. Noting down my achievements, and then also being more open to the smallest networking opportunity. And also just recognizing your abilities. Fantastic. Definitely do that. And for those of you who have shared your action, thank you so much. And definitely head over to the Q&A box to upvote some of the questions. And then also go into networking in terms of how you can help other people and actually what value are you providing them rather than the other way around. And yes, for some of us, LinkedIn is a great way to connect with people and also reconnect with people. So interestingly, through LinkedIn the other day, I actually ended up connecting with somebody who was in the year below me at UCL. She is now a partner at a law firm, one of my client firms. And she actually talked about an event that the firm was running, and I signed up. And interestingly, she then sent me a message and said, Sunita, I think I remember you from UCL. So don't underestimate how, the power of building connections can kind of come back in time as well. And then reflecting on yourself, absolutely, and being proactive. And then to also build your self-confidence. Brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing all of those actions. That's fantastic. So thank you everyone for being so collaborative. Thank you if you're watching this on playback. It's now time for some questions.
Thank you so much, Sunita. I'm definitely going to take away the 3 C's if there's nothing else I take away. But yeah, that was such a brilliant presentation, and we've got some questions coming in thick and fast. So we're going to start with the most popular ones. We've got one saying, thanks for the help again. Would love to know if we need to be proactive on LinkedIn, for example, posting frequently or sharing opinions about our professional field. This person says sometimes they feel less confident about sharing their ideas. Are there any ways to overcome this fear of posting?
Yes, it's a brilliant question. Thank you. I am a big fan of LinkedIn, but I also recognize that LinkedIn isn't for everyone. And all of us have responsibilities and other commitments, and you can't spend the whole day on LinkedIn. So I think it is about being strategic. I think for me, things that have worked well is where I have talked about something that's important to me or something that I think will be relevant to other people. So maybe sharing some practical ideas, sharing more about my own career story, but doing it in a way that is respecting my own boundaries as well. I think on LinkedIn, I am known for being a particular voice in terms of being very collaborative, being quite creative, being very supportive. And people often comment on, my posts saying, it's really nice because it feels like, you're talking in your own voice. I know you, or actually it's just really nice to get to know more about you. But that's my personal preference in terms of sharing different career experiences. One thing, if you don't want to post lots of your own content on LinkedIn, one thing that you can do is you can still really engage in LinkedIn. So you can actually repost other people's posts. But what I recommend is instead of just reposting, add a one-liner comment at the top just to say, it's great to read about this. Or, it's fun, there are some fantastic, top tips in this post. Just so again, it just kind of creates something in terms of your own perspective. Also, commenting on other people's posts is something that is really, really nice. And on LinkedIn, obviously, there is the automated option where it kind of gives you options of the comment you can kind of add. And I appreciate people are really busy, so actually it's helpful to have this in some cases. But what I try and do is actually I write my own comments, and if I know the person, or if I've worked with them before, or I know them in my network, I'll tag them as well. But I'll actually write my own comment, just so it's a little bit more individual as well. I would also say that networking through LinkedIn is really important. Don't just connect with as many people as you can. Try and be a bit more focused. You can follow people on LinkedIn now and you can connect with them. So there is a difference. So you don't have to connect with everybody. It might be that you're just interested. So, for example, I know a number of UCL people following this webinar, or even before the webinar took place, were following my work on LinkedIn, which is great. You know, they're interested in hearing my insights or learning more about what I might be doing. So your posts also don't have to be really long. Again, it might just be sharing, you know, it's fantastic to work on this piece of work, or it might be, again, sharing an article or a link to a podcast. Unfortunately, there are algorithms on any social media platform which are really hard to navigate and manage. So I always say, you just have to do your best and what feels right for you on platforms like LinkedIn.
Thank you. That's so great. Some really helpful tips. I love the just adding a line when you repost. Such a simple way to kind of get your voice out there. We've got lots of questions actually. The next one is, as an introvert, how do you build your network? If you would like to, so they're saying if you could summarize it in 3 points, what would be the most important ones?
Okay, so I'll think of 3 things to share. So if you are more of a reflective person, or you describe yourself as an introvert, I would recommend actually, firstly, reframing networking. Don't use the networking word and actually just think about if you're just building connections. The second thing is to actually just start small. You don't have to kind of build your network through always going through like to massive group events or big conferences. Try and find some networking opportunities, whether it's in the academic space or in the career space that you're in, where there are smaller groups. And I think, you know, work within your own boundaries as well. When you aren't actually in that networking space, if you do feel like you are more of an introvert, and remember, some of us are a combination of different things. Sometimes when I go to events, I'm feeling like being quite chatty and getting to know people. Some events, actually, I might be quite tired, and actually I might feel quite overwhelmed. And actually, I just want to go and speak to a couple of people, or people who I sense that I will be comfortable with. So think about that as well. But I think it's finding your own spaces where you're comfortable in terms of chatting to people. And that's another way of reframing it as well, just seeing it as kind of chatting. But also remember, you're bringing a skill as an introvert in terms of listening and reflecting on what other people have said. And that's a great way to start a conversation. So if somebody does say something, you can actually say, oh, you know, you just mentioned this. It would be great to hear more about that. And that way you're not actually having to share lots about yourself. You're just showing your interest in somebody else.
Thank you. So yeah, that's a great tip. Next question we have is, I want to know how you seek opportunities in line with your brand and goals. Networking is great because it leads to other opportunities once your network has been built, but how would you proactively seek those opportunities for this while discovering what value you bring when you haven't established your brand or your network yet?
Yes, definitely. And that could apply to so many different people. So whether you have just graduated, or maybe you're changing career, or maybe you're starting a new role at a company or a firm. So I think it is actually good to do some kind of reflective work. And actually, for those of you who are quite visual or creative, you could literally just, you know, find a piece of paper or set up a PowerPoint slide for your own reference and just start writing down words that describe your personal brand. So if you remember when I talked through my own kind of journey in terms of how my personal brand has developed and evolved, how it's changed, how it stayed the same, there are definitely words that I resonate with. And it might be that you just want to list 5 words that you want to represent, 5 words that represent your values. I know some people mentioned in the chat box earlier on, you know, being purpose driven, or being caring, or being empathetic. You know, what are some of the qualities that you bring as a person that actually shape your personal brand? I strongly believe that there's no point writing a personal brand that doesn't sit with you well. It's really hard, actually, because a number of people, for lots of different reasons, we may have felt the need to try and assimilate into different teams or different work cultures, or we might also have had to code switch. And so do look up that term. So people always say it's about bringing your true self to work, but actually for some people's context, that's not possible. So it's balancing, you know, what's really important to you in terms of your personal brand, and also what do you want to show, what do you want to demonstrate. But I would recommend even just starting to write 5 words down. That could be a start for you.
Thank you. That's, yeah, brilliant. So we've got another question here, which is, could you share some tips on how to effectively communicate with people who are much more senior than you? For example, CEO or full professor level. So, but those people maybe are often too busy to respond. It can be hard to establish and or maintain connections with them.
Yes. So if we started with how to communicate, I would say, firstly, everyone is individual. So don't assume that because you're speaking to someone senior, they are going to communicate in the same way as their peers at that level. So try and understand what's important to them. With senior people, and actually with anyone at any point in their career, everyone is busy. So it's thinking about respecting their time. If you're trying to network upwards to somebody who's more established in their career or more senior, you've got to come with a purpose sometimes. So if you want to network upwards, say, for example, you're looking for an informal mentor, you've got to also respect their time. They might not be able to offer a mentorship to you. They might not have time to be a sounding board. So if you do receive a no, then you can also ask them, is there anyone else you could recommend that I could speak to? But what I also say is that you do have to respect people's time. And sometimes people generally don't have time to come back to you just because of other commitments, other areas of focus. I think the other part of that was, again, how to actually kind of like build those connections. And you can also ask in your network of, say, like your peers, who have you connected with at a senior level, or who's quite open to connecting? So again, you're getting recommendations for who to get in touch with. With LinkedIn, you can now connect with so many different people who you might not necessarily meet face to face in your career or in your academic studies. So you can do that. But make sure, again, that there is some kind of purpose to it. Not everybody's going to respond to you on LinkedIn. Not everybody has the time to meet for coffee or share more about their career story. So maybe you can research the person in a different way. You know, some people might have their professional profiles up on websites. You know, you can learn about people's careers in that way as well.
Thank you. We've got a question here, which I imagine a lot of people would relate to. They say that the hardest thing they find is getting noticed as a working mother, as they have to be quite structured with their time. They're wondering about how best to utilize their limited time and get noticed for their contributions.
Yes, so I think this applies to working parents in general, working parents of all genders. Anyone who has any other kind of commitment, doesn't necessarily have to be a carer commitment. It's really important to think about who are, say, 3 people in your team or your organization who you do need to influence. Who are they really important in terms of investing in terms of building connections with them, and thinking about what you can say to them that will grab their attention. So can you give them specific examples of something you've worked on? Can you remind people of something you've enjoyed working on? So if any work like that comes your way, you'd be very open to those opportunities. I think finding people in similar situations to you is really helpful. I work with a lot of client organizations in lots of different sectors where they, maybe because of the size of the organizations, and some of them are medium sized, they're not all global massive organizations, but they do have either employee-led networks or inclusion networks focusing on different intersectionalities or kind of lifestyle contexts. And so maybe find your network as well, so that you can also speak to people who work in the same context as you, the same organization, to understand how they navigate it. I am a working parent myself, and I know that things have sometimes been quite challenging because I have had other commitments or time constraints in the day, and I have had to communicate those. But it's also finding people who are going to be supportive, and I acknowledge that not everyone has teams around them or managers around them who get that you have other commitments as well outside of your day job. So it really is about seeking that support. And if you need to, find an informal mentor, or reach out and organize your own coaching to give you more confidence in the workplace, especially if you're navigating with any particular dynamics.
Thanks so much, Sunita. I love that as well. The using the work networks, and yeah, lots of places of work have those. Got another really popular upvoted question. Thank you so much for the help. They say, first of all, and they would love to know how to respond to a conflict with their manager.
So this is actually quite hard for me to comment on, because conflicts can come up in so many different shapes and sizes. But again, I have navigated a lot of different setbacks in my careers. And I think if I reflect on some things that I found helpful, it was firstly trying to give someone feedback who is your manager or senior to you can actually be really difficult. So one thing that I also still recommend to people is to really structure your feedback. If you need to share something, be quite specific about the action or the behavior. The second thing that you can talk about is actually the impact of someone's behavior or decision, or how they came across. What did that mean for the team? What did that mean for the work? What did that mean for you? What did it mean maybe in terms of their personal brand, or maybe how they came across? And then also define what you would appreciate from them. Give them some ideas of what they can do differently, or how they can approach something differently. Not everyone is going to be really receptive to feedback, and that's also a challenge. So if you find that you've tried to give somebody feedback in a very structured and supportive way, so you haven't been overly critical, you've been very factual, then you do need to speak to someone else about it and have a sounding board in terms of, right, what are your ideas here? How can I approach this? But I think, definitely think about people in your organization who you can go to for that guidance as well. And also, again, your support network is incredibly important. So for some of you who've looked at my work, I'm a huge mental health and wellbeing advocate. And I also do wellbeing coaching with clients in different organizations. And I think it is really important that, again, you've got your wellbeing network around you, you've got your strategies that help to kind of boost or increase your wellbeing, especially if you are having to deal with any kind of examples of conflict at work. And I think there is also UCL alumni webinar that was focused on, I think, difficulties at work. So I think definitely look at that webinar as well, in case they can share any ideas.
Thanks, Sunita. And well remembered, we did a webinar on navigating professional and personal differences in the workplace. We've hit time at the moment, but Thank you so much for your presentation, Sunita, and as well for managing to navigate so many questions. I do apologize to everyone whose questions we weren't able to answer, but I'm sure you got a lot of value from the ones that we did manage to get to. I want to say thank you as well to everyone in the audience for joining today. I think if I can ask Sunita if you can stop sharing your screen, and then we're going to just pop a little holding. My colleague Emily is going to share a slide. Thank you so much. You'll see on the screen today we've got a QR code, and in the chat as well, and my colleague Emily will put a link, and both of those will take you to a short feedback form. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a few moments. The form, I promise, is very short, and we'll also send the link out via email for anyone who needs it. So if you have difficulty accessing it now, don't worry, you will receive it in the next couple of days. But we love to hear your thoughts. It helps us to build and shape this program, and to try and ensure that we're bringing everything that we can to it. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. And I just, for now, all that leaves me to do is to say a huge thank you once again to Sunita. Thank you as well to everyone for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you at another UCL Connect event very soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.